In the pre-dawn gloom of June 6, 1944, a letter addressed to my dearest Francis lay tucked inside a uniform pocket, carrying words of hope for a peaceful future. Its author, Thomas Meehan, had penned it the night before in a flurry of nervous energy, thinking it might calm the swirl of emotions overwhelming him. He planned to mail it once he touched ground in Normandy, expecting only the usual hazards of combat. Yet that letter would never be sent, because the plane carrying him and his fellow paratroopers was shot down, disappearing into the dark skies of D-Day. Months later, fragments of that letter would be discovered, bearing witness to the dreams of a man who led easy company with firm discipline and unwavering dedication, yet never got the chance to prove himself in battle. This is the story of Thomas Meehan, whose quiet resolve and devotion to duty remain overshadowed by the tragedy that befell him at the very start of the Allied invasion, but whose memory resonates deeply for those who ponder the fleeting nature of heroism, sacrifice, and life itself. Thomas Meehan was born on July 8, 1921, in Philadelphia, still marked by the legacies of World War I. Though the Great War had ended 3 years earlier, the city, like much of America, was caught between a desire to move forward and a lingering sense of global uncertainty. His parents were hard-working middle-class folks, his father an insurance agent, and his mother a homemaker with a gift for music. They instilled in Thomas and his siblings the importance of education and community. Growing up in the 1920s, Thomas witnessed both the exuberance of the jazz age and the cautionary undercurrent that accompanied it. Then, when the Great Depression struck in 1929, the Meehan family, like so many others, had to tighten their belts. But even in those tougher times, they retained a sense of optimism rooted in faith and a belief in the American dream, that if you worked hard, anything was possible. An introspective yet sociable kid, Thomas balanced a love of reading with a knack for sports. In pickup baseball games on local fields, he was often the one who volunteered to organize teams, making sure no one was left out. Teachers at his Catholic school recognized his leadership potential early on. He was never the loudest boy in class, but friends recall him as someone who spoke up when it mattered, particularly if he thought someone was being treated unfairly. This trait carried over into his teenage years, when he'd help younger kids with homework or stand up for classmates experiencing bullying. By the time he entered high school, Thomas was known for a steady moral compass and a sense of responsibility beyond his years. He attended the University of Pennsylvania, drawn to the idea of studying history and possibly following in his father's footsteps in a professional career. University life opened his eyes to bigger questions about society, international affairs, and what role a single individual could play in shaping the world's future. In the late 1930s, whispers of conflict in Europe grew louder. Nazi Germany's aggression set Europe on edge, and the seeds of global war were being sown. While many college students focused on personal ambitions, Thomas found himself increasingly preoccupied with world events, reading newspaper accounts of Hitler's territorial expansions, and discussing with friends whether the United States could avoid involvement. Even then, he sensed that large sacrifices might be required from his generation. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the United States plunged into World War II. Like countless young men, Thomas felt a surge of patriotic duty. But this wasn't just patriotic fervor. His beliefs were also shaped by a genuine desire to defend democratic ideals against totalitarian threats. He enlisted in the Army, determined to serve in a branch that offered both challenge and the chance to make a tangible difference. The newly formed paratrooper units appealed to him. The idea of dropping behind enemy lines, carrying out specialized missions, and forging tight bonds with fellow soldiers resonated with his sense of purpose. Thomas completed his basic training with flying colors. He displayed physical endurance, mental sharpness, and an aptitude for leadership that caught the attention of his superiors. When they asked for volunteers for the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division, he didn't hesitate. Paratrooper training was grueling, mile after punishing mile of running, obstacle courses that tested both muscle and willpower, and the nerve-shredding leap from aircraft into open sky. Yet in that intense environment, Thomas quietly thrived, forging friendships with men who would later form the backbone of Easy Company. He discovered that the discipline demanded by airborne life fit his organized mindset, while the camaraderie satisfied a deep need for trust and shared sacrifice. Throughout 1943 and into early 1944, the 101st Airborne honed their skills in England, preparing for what everyone knew would be a massive invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe. In this period, Thomas's steadfast qualities led him to rise through the ranks. While some officers approached training with bluster, Thomas brought calm. He believed in mastery of fundamentals, weaponry, navigation, physical conditioning, yet also recognized the emotional burdens his men carried. In small group discussions, he would reassure anxious troopers that thorough preparation was their best defense. Before long, the turbulence within Easy Company's leadership structure gave Thomas an unexpected promotion. He assumed command of the company, taking over from a predecessor whose methods had triggered a near revolt among the enlisted men. Leading these paratroopers, each with strong personalities of their own, tested Thomas's capacity to earn respect. But he approached the challenge as he did everything else, patiently, steadily, letting actions speak louder than words. One significant incident, rarely recounted in official histories, reveals Thomas's character. Late in training, a private under his command froze during a night jump, paralyzed by the fear of leaping into darkness. Other officers might have berated or punished the soldier. Thomas instead climbed back into the plane with him, refusing to let the flight crew take off again until he had personally talked the man through his fear. Eye to eye, he told the private that everyone had doubts, that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the resolve to move forward in spite of it. In the hush of that cargo bay, the soldier found the resolve to jump. It was a private victory for them both, a moment that solidified Thomas's reputation as a leader who looked after the soul of his men, not just their performance. Meanwhile, his personal life unfolded in small but meaningful ways. He had married Frances, the love of his life, just months before shipping out. Their relationship was built on shared values, respect for family, a passion for community service, and a deep capacity for mutual support. In letters home, he addressed her as "my dearest Fran," updating her on his daily routine, the unpredictable English weather, and the quiet times he spent thinking about her smile. He also confided that he worried about the men under him, feeling deeply the weight of sending them into dangerous missions. One letter read, "Sometimes I lie awake imagining the day will jump. I'm not afraid of fighting, but I pray every man returns home to the people who love them." As D-Day approached, the tension in the air was palpable. The Allies were on the brink of launching Operation Overlord, a colossal invasion meant to tear down Hitler's Atlantic Wall and liberate occupied Europe. For the paratroopers of the 101st, it meant dropping into Normandy during the very early hours of June 6th, seizing strategic roads, bridges, and villages ahead of the main beach landings. On June 5th, as the men boarded C-47s, Thomas carried with him that final letter to Frances, never suspecting it might serve as an epitaph to his hopes and dreams. Accounts from surviving Easy Company members recalled how he moved among them in the aircraft before takeoff, offering a quick pat on the shoulder or a whispered reassurance. They also noted a quiet sadness in his expression, as though the weight of command had become unbearably heavy. Not long after takeoff, tragedy struck. Heavy anti-aircraft fire from German flak batteries in the Normandy countryside lit up the sky. Thomas's plane, designated Chalk number 66, was hit, and eyewitnesses described seeing it veer off course, trailing smoke before disappearing entirely. The exact circumstances remain murky, but what's known is that everyone aboard perished, including Thomas. The plane crashed in a field near Saint-Côme-du-Mont, a tragic, fiery end that left Easy Company bereft of its new commander before they ever set foot on French soil. Months later, the wreckage was discovered, along with a battered package of letters that included Thomas's final words to Frances. He had promised her that he would do everything in his power to come home safely, though he acknowledged the risks. "I carry your love with me," one line read, "and that's the truest armor I know." His absence was immediately felt on the ground in Normandy. Easy Company, unexpectedly leaderless, had to adapt quickly. Though men like Richard Winters and others stepped into the breach, the shock of losing a calm, steady presence like Thomas Meehan in the opening hours reverberated throughout the unit. Some veterans would later reflect that if he had survived that drop, the dynamic of Easy Company might have been different. While Winters became a renowned figure in post-war accounts, Thomas Meehan represented an alternate path, a what if that history never allowed to play out. The men felt the loss keenly, grappling with both the heartbreak of a personal friend's death and the practical challenges of pressing forward in the largest amphibious invasion ever. In the swirling chaos of war, especially in the period after D-Day, controversies arose about the paratrooper missions. Some historians question whether men like Thomas were ill-served by intelligence failures or by the Allied High Command's underestimation of German flak defenses. Others wonder if the tight operational secrecy hindered safer flight paths. Although these debates remain largely overshadowed by the eventual success of Operation Overlord, they shine a light on the tragedy faced by entire plane loads of paratroopers who never even got the chance to engage the enemy on the ground. Thomas's story, in particular, highlights how meticulously planned missions can be undone by the harsh randomness of war. From a broader perspective, Thomas Meehan's short but significant life underscores profound themes relevant to modern audiences. First, it reminds us that heroism often goes unheralded, drowned out by the chaos and the overshadowing narratives of bigger personalities. So many men in World War II died before they could truly demonstrate their leadership on the battlefield, yet they had already shown moral courage and training in how they treated their men and in the relationships they tended to back home. Second, his story calls attention to the fragility of life in wartime, how a single bullet, a single piece of shrapnel, or a single flak shell can erase an entire future in an instant. That sense of fleetingness resonates even today, as conflicts around the world still produce abrupt endings to dreams that might have carried the seeds of immeasurable good. Although overshadowed in many histories by more famous figures, Thomas Meehan's example resonates among those who delve deeper into the tales of the 101st Airborne. Letters from his men, discovered after the war, spoke of the calm authority he projected. Even though he had only recently taken command, they believed he cared about them beyond mere strategy. He cared about their survival, their morale, and their dignity as soldiers and as individuals. In an environment that sometimes demanded harsh discipline, Thomas balanced his duties with empathy. Those who encountered him described him as neither showy nor timid, but someone you could rely on to do the right thing even under crushing pressure. His personal life, entwined with Francis's memories, stands as a heartbreaking testament to what was lost. In the months after the war, she clung to the few letters he'd managed to send before D-Day. Reading them over and over, she remembered a man who loved quiet Sunday mornings, a well-crafted novel, and the thrill of possibility in every new day. She also felt the weight of unfulfilled plans. They had dreamed of starting a family, perhaps settling in a suburban neighborhood where he might pursue a civilian career, maybe in education, or possibly something that combined his leadership skills with his love of history. None of it would materialize. On the home front, his parents and siblings grappled with the emptiness left by his death. His mother, who once soothed his childhood fears with lullabies, found herself haunted by the image of her grown son's final moments in that doomed plane. The shock took time to settle, as official notifications often arrived slowly. By the time the family got official word, they'd been bracing for weeks, suspecting the worst, but clinging to hope. Friends and neighbors offered condolences, lauding Thomas's patriotism and valor. Still, for those closest to him, words rang hollow. There would be no returning soldier to share stories of Normandy or cradle future grandchildren on his knee. Though seldom discussed, the moral dimension of his story is also worth noting. Thomas died before he could face the moral dilemmas that so many of his peers confronted, whether in the brutality of the hedgerow battles or in later campaigns like Market Garden or Bastogne. Yet from the glimpses we have, his gentle counsel to anxious troops, his focus on unity and morale, we can infer that he intended to lead in a way that respected human dignity. He recognized that war, for all its demands, didn't have to sever the threads of compassion. Indeed, that quiet moral code was part of what made him so valued by those under his command. As we come to a close, let's consider the enduring lessons from Thomas Meehan's short life. The quiet bravery of stepping up to command in a moment of turbulence. The gentle empathy that recognized each soldier's anxieties as valid. The personal devotion shown in every letter to the woman he loved. And the brutal fragility of mortality, which ended his story in a flash of anti-aircraft fire over Normandy. If we allow ourselves a moment of empathy, we can picture him in that plane, heart pounding, mind brimming with final thoughts of Francis, clinging to the hope that, come dawn, he'd be on French soil, fighting for a noble cause.